like ships in the night. You keep passing me by, just wasting time, trying to prove who's right.
Ed, welcome to the Nerd Herd Podcast. Ed, I have no idea what song that was.
It's Ships in the Night by Matt Kearney.
Okay, I should have known that.
You still don't know who it is, but that's okay.
I have no idea. Sarah and Amy are not with us this week. They had some last minute things pop up on the radar. So we're going to give them the week off, and they're trusting us to not crash the ship here. So we'll do the best that we can. And just so everybody knows, we're recording on Clubhouse again. And we actually have a club. We're kind of legit now. Well, anybody can start a club now in Clubhouse. Before they kind of had it gated. But we have the Nerd Herd Club now. And that's what we're setting up the calendar to record these events on going forward. That's what we're recording with. If you want to keep up with all of our nonsense, and you're in the Clubhouse right now, just click that green little house at the top of this event, and you can join the Clubhouse. The Nerd Herd Clubhouse. Eddie, have you joined the Nerd Herd Clubhouse yet? I think I sent you an invite yesterday.
I did. No, I did. Well, if I click on it, will it tell me? It doesn't tell me. Oh, what's it? Oh, nominate. Okay, I think I'm in. Because I don't think it would let me nominate people. That would be funny if you could.
Okay, yeah. Oh, we have to nominate. I thought it was like, okay, maybe I've got a setting wrong because anybody should be able to join. This is not a gated community.
No. It was just when I was clicking on it, it was saying, like, I just clicked on the three buttons to see what I could do when I was in the room, and it said, hey, you can nominate. Would you? Or I hit the add people button, and I don't think you can add people if you don't do that. So I think I'm good. Oh, it does. We have 18 members. I can see. Oh, it's not too bad. Ah. Not too bad at all.
Very good. 18.
18.
I think I started this yesterday, right? So let's give it a few more days before we start waving our success flag here. But one thing's interesting, Ed. I was on, I don't know if you've heard this yet about Twitter Spaces. Twitter Spaces is kind of a Clubhouse thing on Twitter, but there's no club spaces. I think that's something that makes Clubhouse unique. It feels like more of a free-for-all right now. You can't really title something that you're doing or rooms in Twitter Spaces. So the audio quality was much better. Now, I know there's an update this week on Clubhouse, and supposedly the audio quality now is better here. We'll see on this recording how it comes out. But I will tell you, when I was in Twitter Spaces, the audio quality was pretty damn good. It was like you're on a very high-quality audio conversation with people.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it, but so are you saying like the whole Twitter Spaces thing it's tied to your identity and that's about it?
Yes, that's the way it looks right now. But they've also made these recent announcements about setting up community spaces, selling your tweets, and all this other kind of stuff. I feel like Twitter's like all of a sudden woken up and like, oh, we're not the only kid in town.
Yes.
The only cool kid in town.
Asleep at the wheel for like 8 years and then dealing with all of this whole content moderation. They're like, oh, we should try something new.
Yeah. Like, how about just giving us the ability to edit our tweets, please?
That's too much. You've gone too far.
But now they've got audio on there. And again, not so bad. They had a very pleasant experience. They do kind of have this, like, who's the speaker and who's just listening. So they've kind of simplified what Clubhouse has done, where you've got moderators. I don't think there's a moderator function that I can see yet in Twitter Spaces. And you've got to follow the Twitter Spaces Twitter handle. And there's instructions there to be able to moderate or start Twitter Spaces conversations. And I applied for that. That's
just weird. That's like somebody bought something and tried to wedge it into their platform.
Feels a little bit like that. I think it's a feature development they're working on. I wish they would have done this before because I think, I don't know, Clubhouse has to create an identity for itself and find an audience. They've done it very rapidly, right? I mean, there's about 10 million plus people on here now, where Twitter already had that audience. And if you think about the amount of time that you probably, or I don't know about you, Ed, but the amount of time that I spent on Clubhouse versus Twitter is like 10x. I'm on here, I'm listening, investing more time in Clubhouse than I am on Twitter. And Twitter missed the boat on this.
Yeah, I did see a funny tweet where somebody was like, all you founders and CEOs and VCs, like, how do you have all this time to spend on Clubhouse? I don't know. I'm not calling you out for you spending your time there, but my audio, my ears open available for audio listening time is a bit limited. So I don't know. I would say it's about 50-50 for me right now. I'm not spending a ton of time on either platform, to be honest with you.
And we do want to let everybody who is in our audience just raise your hand. We'll invite you on stage. And Liz has already come up on stage. Hello.
Hello. My goodness, it's been so long. And like without trade shows right now, I feel like I'm missing out on all my storage buddies. It's so great to reconnect with you guys.
It is. It's been a while. So how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Bob is doing really well. We, as you guys, obviously we were founded on storage companies, but we've really expanded into all kinds of tech now. So AI, IoT, all kinds of SaaS platforms. And, the pandemic was interesting, but we're on the other side of the sort of the business hit that I think a lot of us experienced. And the other crazy thing is we went fully remote. So that's been interesting, but actually kind of neat. It's like being able to go wherever you want. And then I would say Clubhouse. Initially, I totally didn't want to go on it. I was like, oh my God, it's another app, another thing to manage. And I've really been enjoying it for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks that I've been on it. And like you guys, I'm spending a lot of time on it and networking and meeting lots of cool people. And just, the thing that we need to invent, maybe we can invent it, is how to get more time in the day.
Yeah,
right?
really.
It's like, I just want to be talking and listening and meeting people. And I also need to do work.
Have you tried Twitter Spaces yet?
I have not. And so I was very, very much listening with curiosity to what you guys were just saying right now. Did you just try it once or have you tried it a couple times?
Yeah, tried it yesterday. Kind of a friend has the access to create Twitter Spaces. That's the thing. You got to apply for it. And then apparently there's a pretty quick turnaround of a couple of days. I applied for it yesterday. We'll see. But the audio quality was really good. But it seemed like a little bit of a free for all because there wasn't really kind of a theme or a name that you like, at least with here, this is the Nerd Herd podcast recording.
Right.
And we have a Nerd Herd club. There it's just kind of like whoever gloms together can have a conversation. So it seems a little less structured, but it is a new product. So I don't want to be too hard on it, but It looks like Twitter's playing catch up to Clubhouse. It seems like such a natural fit for Twitter that they should have done this a while ago, because I think people want to spend time and invest and have these kind of conversations there. And Clubhouse was kind of the tipping point to push them there. Right.
I mean, the thing that I love about Clubhouse is there's no video. Like, you could just walk around, in your pajamas, or you could be all dressed up. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. And I think there's also something to be said for focusing on voice. Like, I certainly think I concentrate better on what's being said if I'm not just worried about like what everybody's look on their face is, or like what face I'm making when I'm talking. So, I hated the whole video thing. I would say I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you think that video is like has a place for ever amen, or how are you feeling about the voice side of things?
I consume a ton of YouTube, but that's a one-way consumption mechanism. So when you're talking about interactive conversations, I completely agree with you. Like I sort of do wish for the days back when we had, we weren't Zooming all the time, or we weren't WebExing with video, because I don't typically turn on my video because I live in a small space. And so I could be in a random room for that 1 hour, that call, because I've got kids doing remote learning and so on. And so you're that one person that never turns on their video. And there's a little bit of like, I don't want to say there's any shaming. Nobody's ever said anything, but you kind of feel like the odd man out. And I completely,
you've got the FOMO going on.
Yeah. And then I also agree with the whole concentration aspect of it. But the other thing too is that, like, I think with Clubhouse, you're typically, it's not really, I don't know, maybe people are using it for background noise, but I feel like there's a little bit of deliberate, choice here. So when you join a room, like, you are listening. And then also when you get put up on stage, then you start engaging. So it's a completely different, it's like a two-way medium. It's not Twitter where it's just like blast out a bunch of stuff. Like, you have to actively, my opinion is you should be actively engaging, right? You're not going to waste your time just joining a room or a club or whatever it is and sitting there just kind of, silently, I'm sure there's people that silently listen, but you have to think about it more. You're not sitting there looking at the people who are up on stage and what their mannerisms, and you're really focused on that voice conversation.
Yep. I think the other thing too is that people are a lot more polite. on Clubhouse. And if they start veering off or interrupting, there's a lot of great moderators, and they'll just like silence that person. And when it's their turn, they'll be like, "Hey, it's your turn now." And the people are like, and this is like pretty high profile people are, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I interrupted. Here's what I meant to say." And I think it takes away some of that anonymity BS, right? Like the whole Twitter hero or comment hero stuff. And I can't tell you how much I love that, because not only is it like democratizing who's talking to whom and how, but civility is a thing, right? It's like self-enforced because you don't want to sound like a jerk. And I think that's a huge thing about Clubhouse that's really positive, that maybe Twitter Spaces, of course, will probably have as well, or let's hope so.
Yeah, they could get those trolls jumping in and bombarding and creating trouble. Here's the thing, Liz. Sarah and Amy are off this week. Do you want to stay on the stage with us as we talk through the topics of the week and chime in?
I'd love to do that. I'd be happy to.
It's all impromptu. This is how Clubhouse works, right?
Cool. I have about like 15 minutes. So
you only have you for a short period of time. We'll take it. We'll take your 15 minutes.
Right.
Real quick though, just to level set for everybody. Of course, Eddie and I know what you do and what Baba does. You just want to give a kind of a quick what Baba is all about?
Sure. So we are a B2B and B2B2C communications agency. We do public relations. We do marketing services outsourced to companies. We do social media for companies and individual executives. It's all very integrated. We've been around for 11 years now, which is nuts. I mean, I'm pretty sure I met you, Greg, before I was doing Bava.
Yeah.
Started the company in the belly of the Great Recession in 2009. And so we hit a decade last year. And so it's been really, really great. And before the pandemic, we were in the Bay Area. So we had a huge headquarters there. We were also in San Diego and in Austin, and we were about to open up an office in Seattle. So now we're fully remote. I think in the future, we'll do the hybrid thing, like a lot of companies. And we've worked with over 140 companies at this point. So we've had companies like Cloudera be with us from when they were like less than 50 people to all the way through their exit.
Yeah, look how big they've gotten.
I know, it's huge. So, Pure Storage and MuleSoft and Gainsight and Sumo Logic. And, so we've worked with a lot of really amazing B2B companies. And it's also a great place for people to work and build their tech marketing and PR and marketing careers.
Absolutely. And you're right, Liz. I've known you way before Baba days. Well, that maybe not way before. I don't want to make this sound like ancient history. But
No, I think it's probably ancient history. That's all right.
I've certainly grown through the industry just as you have with similar timelines. But let me ask you this. Let me press the envelope here. Are you doing anything with NFTs? That's the cool, hip, cool kids buzzword in Clubhouse and elsewhere these days.
So I'm not doing anything with it yet. I'm learning about it. So, it's super new. There was actually an interesting article on Medium that I read this morning by somebody who wrote if you think that NFTs are the future, you got to really think about the environmental impact. Because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and it's no big deal, right? And there's like the mining of all that stuff has an environmental impact, which is interesting because people often don't talk about that. And yet we're like, oh my God, climate change, right? So, and then one of my friends is an artist. And so, she has some interesting opinions on NFTs because on the one hand, okay, yeah, so it's opening up avenues for artists. But on the other hand, she kind of thinks that it's going to be a flash in the pan. So I have no opinion yet. I'm just learning about it.
So let's do a level set for everybody. So an NFT is a non-fungible, I don't know if I pronounce it right, non-fungible token. And a non-fungible token is a special type of cryptographic token that represents something unique. And what we're seeing is a lot of artwork. Jack Dorsey just put his first tweet up as an NFT. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm trying to look here, I think the bidding on it, is it 2.5 million is what the bidding for his first just setting up my Twitter tweet, his original tweet, 2.5 million. So a lot of people are comparing this to like collecting baseball cards and other things that collect value over time. I think the confusing thing for me is the scarcity aspect to this, where there's a scarcity to the original Honus Wagner card. There's only so many of them that exist out there, and that's what makes it so valuable. Does Jack's tweet? I can imagine he could probably sell others electronic versions of this that would be just as valuable? I don't know. The scarcity part of this confuses me as a collectible, and it's something that grows in value.
Mm-hmm. It's so strange that the aspect of human psychology that this brings up, right? Like it started when you think about the early Facebook games, when they first started selling digital things like, hey, I can buy a pitchfork for my farm or whatever it is. And
right.
Some of us were like, it's not real. And other people are like, oh yeah, I'll totally pay $10 for that. So what does it say about us as humans that we will pay money for things that don't exist? I find that totally fascinating. And I agree with you about the thing about scarcity or plentifulness. Like, well, if you can make anything an NFT, well, what does that really mean? And then it gets tied to people's, in many cases, right, like people's identity or their clout.
It's so weird too, because it's like Wall Street's been creating stuff out of nothing for a long time, and you're just kind of used to that, right? But I think now it's like it's democratized. Like all of a sudden now we have a bunch of quants that are really like it's a GIF or a tweet or whatever thing it is, and now so everybody's kind of creating this value. I think that's the other thing too, is like assessing value. I think you and Greg are both hitting the nail on the head. It's so hard to tell based on if something is scarce or not, how much it's worth. And I think without kind of a non-tangible, non-fungible asset, you don't really have an idea. So, I mean, I don't know. To me, I wonder if it's a flash in the pan too of something new. So people are going to jump in. You're going to see some really big things happen. Like it's almost like if Elon Musk did something, if Jack Dorsey's going to do his first tweet, whatever, like people, they're going to just, I wonder how much of the initial flash is really due to the celebrity nature of it versus the value of the actual assets themselves.
Yep. It's like there's going to be a Sotheby's for NFTs in the future or something. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily going to go away, but it's just wild to see this stuff developing right in front of us. The other thing that was interesting was like the whole run up, on Reddit. That the whole stock thing that happened. GameStop, right?
Yeah, we know a little bit about that. Ed lost a fortune on it.
Oh, did you really? Oh no!
To some people it might be a fortune. To me, it was. I was okay with the fact that I lost it. Not pleased, but it's like okay, I knew what I was getting into, right?
Yep. But it's like, I don't know if it's the pandemic or what, but like we as a species are like making stuff up and throwing money at it.
That is so
playing games with it. We're just bored. We got nothing else to do.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I don't think this would have happened in any time in history other than right now, where you've got the collision of so many different external forces working to ramp up speculation like we've never seen before.
So what's interesting about this is that to me, NFTs and the GameStop thing, from a democratization and people being engaged and involved and things not being controlled by a central source, I completely agree. What's interesting about the GameStop stock thing, though, is I forget who put out an article, but there was something a couple of days ago that said it's the GameStop thing where people realized that institutional investors were over shorting the stock. It was a very calculated maneuver.
Right.
And so, on the one hand, like if you compare that to NFTs at the moment are kind of like, it's the wild, wild west, but you're right. Like pandemic times, people engage, like people paying attention to all this stuff and realizing that, it's not the situation where you go to your broker, your financial advisor and say, what do I invest in? They're like, well, here's your, 60-20-20 split. And, it's not that at all. People are almost taking a little bit of their disposable income. And you know what, though, Liz, you brought up the whole buy a pitchfork in a game thing, right? Like this really seems like it is in general next level. People are just realizing, hey, we actually aren't really limited by a game publisher or whatever. We can make shit up whenever we want.
Yeah. And it's really it's like the democratization and gamification of speculation.
Yes.
Right. And it's just like, well, I don't have time to go to Las Vegas and go to the casino to throw coins in the machine or play blackjack. So let me invent, like, holy cow, I can invent blackjack and, online with invisible stuff. It's so crazy.
I was just thinking that. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is that, if you look at gambling in general or speculation, it's generally controlled by a core set of company, people, governments, whatever you want to call it. And when you look at this, like, we all wondered, hey, when are governments going to get involved in blockchain? Maybe they're going to regulate it. What are they going to do? I don't think anybody in their right mind thought 2 years ago, like NFTs would even come about. So like, we're the shark jumping the other shark at this point, right?
And I think you have a confession to make here. You've got a closet full of servers that are mining Bitcoins right now, don't you?
I don't have a closet full. I have a couple of computers that are doing work. Liz brought up the other point though, and I've known about it, but to me it was like, I have these graphics processors sitting there doing work. Sorry, they're just sitting there. I can have them do work. And so I do, like, I've got like 4 machines, and they're not mining much, right? It's like between $20 and $40 a day.
But you're doing folding too.
I am doing folding. That's where it started. And then one of my buddies, Chris Weissopel, who hacker from 20 years ago, testified before the Senate. We all banded together and did the folding at home thing for COVID and got a really, large team going. And I think there was a little bit of folding, when the vaccines kind of Moderna and all those other people started coming out with vaccines, we're like, okay, we can throttle back. And I said, there's also a scarcity on GPUs at the moment. And so I was like, I want to upgrade my computers, whatever. And I got a couple GPUs and I had a couple left over that I could get rid of. And my buddy, Chris, was like, do you want to sell those to me? Because those are really efficient miners. And I was like, mining what? And so, yeah, like I had never done anything. And dude, this is like, we're way late to the game here, right? Like mining, 5 years ago or whatever, you could have made a lot of money. So this stuff that is here now, it's almost like paying rent, and factored in, like I said, it's like between $700 and $800 a month that I'll get after power consumption. But it still is one of those things where I feel pretty guilty, because I'm like, should I go out and buy some solar panels? Because this is chewing up carbon and all these other things. Like, I don't live next to a hydroelectric dam or a stream or something. So anyway, that's my confession. I have guilt though.
Worse yet, you live in Austin, so they've had a little issue with power lately.
All of a sudden, it was all fun and games until you realize the power situation in Texas.
Yeah.
How much power does it draw? I mean, do you have a sense?
Yeah, it's probably so. In a general sense, I have like 4 machines running, and so they're consuming probably about maybe like, I don't know, $80 a month in power, but they're making, $800 a month. So it's each machine, I would say roughly 250 watts per machine. I've got 4 machines going. So it's about 1,000 watts. So it's like 2 refrigerators going, pretty much full bore. It's not an insane amount of money or anything like that. So that's what it looks like. So you could obviously augment, you could put, probably 6 to 8 solar panels on your roof and probably power what you're doing.
There's a startup idea right there, Ed. I mean, seriously, what you're talking about, like, I don't want to go do this, but an idea could be to create like a solar power startup that specifically sells to people who want to do this and come up with some kind of neat business model. And so to offload off of the regular power grids, and maybe people who aren't really interested in solar would actually want to do it.
Well, so what's super interesting, like I kind of thought about that, and I'm like, just in general, like, does it make more sense to, solar in itself is an expensive investment. But if you look at it though, if you did install solar, you would make more money at the moment. They're kind of saying in another year and a half, Ethereum mining, which is the only one that I think they're mining other coins too. But Ethereum, you don't make money mining Bitcoin anymore unless you're in China and next to a hydroelectric dam with like a massive amount of, of very high end compute or proprietary stuff. But Ethereum mining is making money. Ethereum is getting ready to switch versions, and then it's changing models from like a burden of proof. I don't know what it is, but basically mining for Ethereum might become devalued. But if you think about it though, if it weren't, and if you look at cryptocurrency in general, you make more money mining cryptocurrency than you would selling it back, doing net metering on the grid. And that's kind of mind blowing. Like the fact that you're like, you know what? I got solar because I could send excess consumption back to the power grid. If you could somehow basically say, okay, when I'm not doing at night, if I've stored electricity from my solar panels up in my Tesla batteries or whatever, and I'm not using a lot, then I'll go ahead and use that for mining and make money. I think that makes a lot of sense. More sense than solar panels on their own giving money back to the grid.
Right. Totally.
And I want to remind everybody, we've got a little bit of an audience here on Clubhouse. Feel free to raise your hand, jump into the conversation. We're talking about NFTs and blockchain and cryptocurrencies right now, but I do want to move on to our next topic, Ed. And you were pretty ambitious about this in our show notes. We're talking about some of the latest security concerns that popped up in the last week. At least 30,000 U.S. organizations newly hacked via holes in Microsoft's email software. And this has been all over Twitter, TechMeme, and other places in the last few days. Can you boil this down for us? What is going on here?
Yeah, so it looks like there is a bunch of exploits in Microsoft Exchange in this latest incident for the year, right? It seems to keep on going. But 30,000 U.S. new organizations, have been hacked via holes in Microsoft Exchange. It's on par probably with SolarWinds. I mean, we thought SolarWinds was bad and the fallout from that was going to be negative, but this Microsoft Exchange, a bunch of these holes obviously have shown that there's a lot more exposure out there, and it wasn't just things like with things like SolarWinds. So there was that.
What we don't know here yet, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been a hack. We don't know if it's actually been exploited, or do we?
No. That's the point. So the point is that there's 30,000 new organizations that have been hacked due to these exploits.
Right, but it's not like there's ransomware going on. Or
So that's where the slippery slope is, because when you think about it, a lot of this is like, espionage, like economic espionage, industrial espionage, those kinds of things. Like, you don't necessarily see ransomware or something like that as being the visible thing. Like we generally associate, hacks and ransomware together because we see these things come straight out in the news and we're like, there's a direct impact. But when you think about it in general, like the security implications of obtaining private information, be it for commercial or economic reasons or on individuals to steal identities, like the fact that 30,000 organizations have been essentially hacked, raises all sorts of things that you might not see visible now, but over time it might be clear, because you might say, oh, and they're tying this to a Chinese espionage group, right? You might say, oh, well, there goes, the supplier to Boeing. Now we see why the Chinese plane not only has a great design that matches, a Boeing airplane, but now the engines look pretty cool too. So I think it's you're not going to necessarily see things other than the shit that United Airlines had happen to them, which we'll get to in a second. But from these 30,000, I don't know what we're going to see in the very short term, in terms of the impact.
So, and I'm going to mess up your name yet again.
Voon.
That's right.
Voon. Okay, I'll get it. I won't screw it up anymore. So, Voon, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. I have a question about that hack. And, I totally understand where you're coming from, man. The IP lost, the potential for lost income, all the intellectual property. Yeah, it manifests as competing products, etc. But, the interesting about the SolarWinds hacking comparison was that SolarWinds people who didn't update, they were okay. But in this case, I know for a fact that most people who have Microsoft Exchange are very bad at keeping things updated. Do you know if this particular hack or situation is because of lack of update, or is a new vulnerability just discovered overall? Because 30,000 customers, it just leads me to think, I'm not sure which direction that would be,
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I haven't seen so far if it's due to older Exchange servers sitting out there, because that's a great point. If you look at SolarWinds, that hack was basically, maliciously putting a backdoor in software that got distributed out, right? And in the case of Exchange, obviously that's been around. I'm going to guess. I mean, so the 4 Exchange server flaws, that stuff was just released on Tuesday. So my sense is that these attacks or this stuff has been out there for a while. where these organizations were getting penetrated. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you the time between when people knew this was actively being exploited and when the patch happened, like if it was, 4 days, 4 months, a year, what it was. But, just the fact that they released it on Tuesday, obviously, 30,000 organizations and something being released on a Tuesday, my guess is that, or last Tuesday, my guess is those flaws have been out there for a while, and Microsoft did not know about them and did not have any awareness about it.
Okay, I have a question. I have a question for Liz on this, because Liz, you work with a lot of clients, and I don't want you to name any clients or anything like that. But when we talk about in terms of crisis communications, when companies have been impacted by breaches like this, and a lot of times, a lot of the big questions that people that are consumers of these technologies are like, why aren't they sharing more? Why don't we know more? What is some of the guidance you generically give to your clients when they're running into a situation that has so much exposure?
Right. I mean, it's complicated, and it's very much, as you might imagine, on a case-by-case basis. But our recommendation definitely is to be transparent and as fast as possible. Because number one, it's the right thing to do. And number two, people appreciate when you do the right thing. So hiding behind something like that is it's bad news bears for everybody. So it's a question of, actually, one of the biggest things is to make sure you have a crisis communications plan set up in advance. Right. And it doesn't matter if it's 3 pages or 50 pages of crisis comms that you have established in advance to understand what you're going to do and what you're going to say as a template for when a crisis hits for different kinds of crises. And so one of those very huge crises can be that you've been breached or your technology got so something that you're using got breached, some kind of tech that you're using got breached, and now your customers are exposed, or you're actually the vendor that created the technology that was breached. In either case, preparation is really the thing to do, because then you have a template and you can act fast. And then it's a question of, do you proactively reach out to the press? Ideally you have media that you already have good, strong relationships with, that you are confident will write a fair story that is productive and actually helps customers, rather than just looking to, just to be sensationalist, right? And then there is a fair bit amount of that in the media, even in the tech media, generally these days. So, yeah, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, it sounds like if you don't have a plan and you spend the first couple of days figuring out what your plan is going to be and having meetings of what we should say, that's when you're already starting to get behind the curve. Right.
And no smart company, I mean, certainly none of our clients that are in a space where something like that could ostensibly happen, like all of them have crisis comms in place, plans in place. If you don't have a plan in place, I would say, speed dial to a crisis comms specific agency. So we don't take on clients if you're not already a client and you have a crisis, we're not the people to go to. We will refer.
You're not taking that fire drill.
No, but we're happy to take on the fire drill if it's an existing client. And then if it's a really big fire drill, well, sometimes it takes more than one agency to help you, right? Because you got to fight the fires from multiple different places. So, have some people on speed dial because things happen, right?
I have a question about that, Liz. Would you say that would be like in line with the CISO or even nowadays the trendy thing is to have a vCISO? Would you think that would be something at the area of responsibility for that group?
Well, it would certainly be. So the comms stuff would be coming out of corporate comms, and the CISO and whoever is responsible for anything related to security inside of a company should absolutely be involved. They should likely be the spokesperson. So there should be pre-made quotes that that you can fill in the blanks on what has, for what has happened. So you're not just because the worst thing could be is oh, we don't have anything. And then you're trying to make it up and it's going through 20 people to figure out what you're going to say. You haven't decided in advance. And, it's a big deal for the CISO to be quoted. So, but yeah, definitely having that person and their team involved in the creation of whatever is going to be communicated is vital.
And I can appreciate the challenge, right? You want to get good, clear communications out. and I don't want to use this as cover for vendor, because there's a lot of companies that are just really bad and slow at responding or communicating anything when these happen. And I suspect oftentimes they don't even know the extent of the breach or the challenge or the problem, and they're trying to get their arms around what the situation is before they say anything publicly, kind of a cover your ass move, right? They want to share information, but they also want to make sure they have a full scope of this, in that they're not overplaying it or underplaying it up front.
Right.
So
and they want a solution, right? Like they want to have they ideally people want to like be like, hi, this thing happened and this is the solution. But if too much time is passing, you might want to, because here's the thing, it's like, you don't want to have a gaping hole. And if nobody knows that there's, say 30,000 people know that there's a gaping hole, but you don't want to inform 100,000 or, a million other people that there's a gaping hole without a patch. So that's the other trick, that you want to know how to fix it. Whenever
I have a problem, I have Ed on speed dial.
That's the worst advice ever. Yeah, I'm not.
As our resident security expert.
No, that's fair. And Liz, did you say you had to run? We don't want to keep you if you're.
I do, but I'm having so much fun. So yeah, I should jet. I'm getting my sailing certification tomorrow, and I need to study up. And
oh wow!
Be on the water for 2 days, and wish me luck. I've really got into sailing about a year and a half ago, and got a boat and been sailing it. But it's time to get the paperwork.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Well, thanks, Liz, for spending a little bit of time with us. Really appreciate it. So great, and hope you come back next week.
I would love
Absolutely.
to. Keep me posted. I'd love to join. Have a great rest of your conversation.
Thanks,
Liz.
Thanks. Bye.
And we've got a few other people that joined us up on stage. Christopher, did anything that Eddie say offend you that you need to refute?
No. Well, Exchange offended me. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Exchange. As a long time Exchange architect over the years before they released 2007, the worst product in existence. but I digress. That actually kind of raises a point of what actually concerns me about this announcement recently, these vulnerabilities and breaches, because it goes back to up to 2010. So 2010, 2013, 2016, and so forth are all affected by this breach and this compromise. And typically, and I found this to be, with the what was the Cisco Cisco had a breach that went back so far within its versions, but then they stopped actually tracking on versions that they no longer, quote, supported. And my concern on this is this thing may go back to 2007, 2003. Not that anyone hopefully is running those from an infrastructure standpoint, but this kind of brings me back to, you remember, what was it, January 10, January 11, 2020, which was end of support for 2008 R2, Win 7, etc., when they officially ended support. And the day it was going to go end of support, the NSA released a vulnerability list, which allowed it to be in the standard release cycle of things that need to be patched. And it's because, hey, this one's been highly exploited by us for all this time. Now we're going to release it to the company to go and actually fix, so that way they can go and address this issue. And all these things, I mean, the major mega breaches over the past several years alone, this kind of rings true of that. I mean, was this known? Likely, right? I cannot speak on behalf of one thing or the other, right? But was it? It certainly can take a bit to fix an issue like this, especially when it's traversing a decade of versions or more potentially.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, it makes me worry how long this was in the wild. I have found some of these nation state actors will actually use these products as an exploit mechanism, and then once it gets discovered by a nation state that is not them, suddenly it becomes a problem and it's a priority to resolve, and then it goes to the standard channels. I mean, if we remember,
of course, right?
What was the Intel one? What was the Intel brief?
WannaCry.
Yeah. Now it was not WannaCry. It was the other one. The not Shell Shock.
Spectrum.
Yeah. Basically those two different CPU type ones.
Oh yeah, yeah, Spectre.
Spectre. Yeah, I guess it was Spectre and WannaCry. Those two were one that functionally and fundamentally kind of known, right? I mean, they were design functions, and,
right?
I mean, because how do we know it's a problem? Well, in the documentation, it says this is how we do things. And it's not to say that that's the case for this exchange one, which is massive. One, the subtext on this issue is this affected Azure and Office 365, but they fixed it because they manage that infrastructure. So that made it easier. So it's like, you're not affected because we already fixed it in all of our servers. But by the time we finally got around, like, hey, here's a reason you shouldn't move to Office 365, right?
So do you think that companies will use this as more motivation for driving people to SaaS in general?
100%. I mean, it certainly makes it much easier structurally at that point.
Like, is there an incentive? I don't want to say is there an incentive to go back and audit code and fix code out? Because obviously, I believe that companies, when security holes are identified, they do that. But the scrutiny, going forward, people obviously care about the SaaS services that they run more, and maybe, like you said, that Office 365 and those products were vulnerable as well, and Microsoft fixed those, and there wasn't. I guess as far as we know, there's no indication that Microsoft preferentially fix those security holes in their SaaS products before releasing anything to the general public. But I think in general, like, it's an interesting, to me, it sucks, right? Because I think I like SaaS, but I also think SaaS is a huge money grab. And so, if you can't clean your house, then hire a housekeeper, and that's what SaaS is. But at the same time, you pay a lot of money over the course. Like, Adobe's shifted to a complete SaaS model, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But it's one of those things where I wonder if there's motivations for not necessarily maintaining the COTS stuff that they sell you that is perpetually licensed.
Well, at least being able to speak to that is let me just finish a point on that is a release cycle for a patch internally on the internally deployed SaaS thing can typically be done within a 2-week to 4-week sprint. To do the exact same feature or capability to release to the general marketplace will typically take 6 to 18 months, depending. So, I mean, that that's where the money's at in one way or the other, right?
Go ahead, Bob.
I think it's in part because it's the development cycle methodologies. You're talking about waterfall versus CI/CD pipelines, which has a lot of more agility in the cloud and SaaS products, which inherently by design are made to be multiple iterations and quickly evolve. If you have a ship product that traditionally stamps onto a CD or DVD, those binary bits are much different in interplay. So I think that's the paradigm shift that you're dealing with right there.
I think that's part of it, but I think that I have obviously seen a lot of software continue to shift to more. Well, so security updates are generally treated a little bit different, where they try to patch those holes a little bit sooner. But I have seen a shift in general products where they're releasing a lot more often. The one big difference, though, I think, is that when you look at, waterfall or CI/CD, whatever it may be, the big difference here is, Exchange, when you sell it as a packaged product, has to be, you don't own the entire stack. And when you look at cloud services and SaaS as a vendor, you own that entire stack. So your testing has to be a lot less, in my opinion, rigorous for components that are below that line of software. I think containerization and all those things are well, it's a double-edged sword, right? But those kinds of things make patching and testing a little bit easier. But again, you're relying on a ton more different dependencies and libraries that you have to take care of yourself. But that aside, I really do think that, like, the paradigm shift, you hit the nail on the head. We're changing from an era where we did do, waterfall and things that are large software packages that still exist. Enterprises don't necessarily get off of a software package because of a development methodology change in the back end, right? They're like, this thing is working. I don't really need to change it out. So you have a lot of remnants and things age out a lot slower in the enterprise space, which leads to these whole things with 30,000, business entities or whatever organizations compromised.
I just want to jump in here. We, one of the folks from our audience, Paul, jumped up on stage. Paul, could you introduce yourself, and do you have a question or a comment on this?
Yeah, this is Paul Barron from NetV Pro. My question was going to be, why was the Office 365, either patched or didn't have the vulnerability? But you guys already answered that. So I guess that was my comment.
Do you use Office 365?
Yeah, so all of our clients, we moved over to Office 365 and deprecated the Exchange servers completely years ago.
Was that a hard process to convince them from going? I mean, obviously, when you have software like that, it's a sunk cost to some degree. So was shifting those customers over to a subscription model, did you feel like there was a lot of pain in that, or did they see a lot of value?
So both is the answer. Most of them moved over readily without a problem because, we are their experts. But I had one client that we actually just terminated their agreement last month because they would not get off their Exchange server.
I've also heard anecdotal stories as well where you've got situations where they want to use the Office 365 services, but they want to duplicate and replicate all the data that they have from their existing infrastructure, just in case they have to fall back to it. I've seen that level of uncertainty with some enterprises that they see the value in SaaS, but they want a copy of everything to make sure that they won't lose it.
Are you suggesting that they're actually performing backups of their 365 environment? Because
some are.
Most don't, though. Most don't. That's what created whole business models around that. I'll speak to this one point, though, is I'd say I once had an environment that due to a major critical Exchange outage, we stood up Office 365 during the outage. And then when we were able to finally recover the data, just migrated over and business has been usual and went from issues to zero issues because it was no longer a problem.
Well, back in the day, I worked for a newspaper, and there was a lot of hesitance to move over to SaaS just because of the whole multi-tenancy issues and uncertainty around maintaining your data and stuff like that. So I still, in the enterprises that I talk to today, I think email to some degree is a foregone conclusion. But you know what? I tend to work quite a bit with financial service companies, and they are still so hesitant. I mean, yeah, they probably have finally within the last few years, made that step to email as a SaaS kind of consumption model. But I think in general, Greg, it doesn't surprise me that, look, they want to be able to back up, their email because it's such a critical business function to them. I see a ton of that still. And I think they'll let some of these easier consumer type of technologies like email go first, but it's on a lot of their core business functions, it's kicking and screaming that they don't necessarily feel comfortable with CSPs in general.
Well, it's not just email, right? It's SharePoint. Think of all the services that Office 365 covers. But before we move on, Ed, there was another story, another hack that took place this week with passenger data from some of the biggest airlines in the world. What's the background on this one?
Yeah, so from what we can tell, the Star Alliance, which is an airline, I guess, alliance group for really focused around loyalty and benefits. That's
Delta, right? Or is that United?
No, that's United. That's United, Lufthansa. I forget.
Crap! I gotta go back in there and make sure my miles are still there.
So your miles are still there, but what you did with your miles and information about you in that loyalty program has been compromised. And they said, we suggest you change your United Airlines password as well. In general, that there was a compromise that definitely affects the airline that you and I fly, right? Which is United.
Yeah. I haven't traveled in so long. I forgot Star Alliance was United.
Yeah. So it's funny though, because we're not traveling as much as we have been. And, when you kind of look at it, what is the value there? But people obviously, have information that, based on their activity, what they spent miles on, where they accumulated miles, all that stuff is kind of fair game. That people know what you did with your mile stuff.
Well, we're in the home stretch here real quick. I just want to touch on, there's another article that popped up I would recommend everybody read. It's on Fast Company about making Amazon cool. And this is about interviews with more than a dozen designers, many of whom worked with Jeff Bezos, about his failed attempt to make Amazon a cool brand like Apple and Nike. If you read through this story, this is like, and look, I have nothing against Amazon. And in fact, I think Amazon's pretty cool already from a logistics perspective, right? What they've done to the logistics industry is just an amazement to me. But if you see like the first couple paragraphs of the story, again, it's in Fast Company. I think it came out today. Like people are in Faraday cages working, so that they can't take Ubers into the office to work on this project, and just the super secrecy around how Amazon is making the brand. I thought it was a very interesting story. It tells you a lot about how Amazon operates in so many different ways. And again, I don't want to bang on Amazon here, but the fact of how they try to remake the brand, the process they went through to design the Fire Phone, the e-reader. What's the e-reader called, Ed?
The Kindle?
Kindle. And the Echo and other things. There's a lot of insight into this. And Amazon's a successful company, but they did it by not being an Apple and a Nike type brand. They did it by the innovations behind the less sexy parts of the industry, with warehousing and logistics. So, well,
and I would also argue like there is a stark difference between how Amazon approaches things versus how some of these, Apple and Nike.
Yeah, there's cultural differences between the companies. Plain and simple.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you kind of see how those things are surfaced. But you were talking about Amazon doing an amazing job on the back end, and I really, man, it's hard for me to give them a ton of kudos because I think that. I mean, so when COVID hit, we saw their logistics fall apart completely. And then when we dealt with this issue in Texas, like Amazon literally fell off in so many broken ways. Like to some degree, I want Amazon to be that company that gets logistics right, does things right, and they're not an evil corporation copying other people's designs and just completely leeching the market. Maybe there's going to be an Amazon truck that knows logistics well enough that those guys are going to have a nurse in there and they're going to drive around vaccinating everybody from COVID. No, we lose the ability to have water. And look, man,
just one comment about Amazon.
What's that?
I had to laugh at this because I look at the huge stand, and I have to say it before I forget, but pyramids were built by slaves, and today we admire the pyramids. Amazon, there's not much difference there. They were built by the labor-intensive sweat and toil.
Yeah,
about that.
Yeah, completely. So I'm sitting there, and look, trucks can't drive when it's snowy and icy. I get that, right? But I had packages from Amazon that were basically like, it's lost. It says it's going from one place to another to get to the Austin area, and then it'll be delivered to me, right? It's 5-7 days. And I know that the truck is not sitting on the interstate for 5 days. So you would think that a company with logistics handled would at least say, we know where your package is and we can't predict the weather, but it looks like, it's at least at this place. I had probably 2 or 3 orders that had been ordered before the snow hit. And they basically said it was in the middle of transit from one Amazon distribution place to another.
Did you ever get it?
So yeah, like a week and a half later, it was, dude, I don't know, just going back to what Voon said, they operate not in a wholesome way. They operate on razor thin. The system has to be working perfectly in order for Amazon to hit the metrics or the goals in terms of being able to do your same day delivery and delivery within 2 days for free. Everything has to be working in a very well optimized manner, or if it's not, all of those things go out the window.
But remember this, Amazon does not make money off of Amazon.com. Amazon makes money off of AWS.
AWS, right? Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? You do what is sad to me is when that happened, I ordered some plumbing stuff from Ace Hardware and a bunch of other places, and I got those things, and they were a day or two late because FedEx and UPS. I did give FedEx and UPS kudos on Twitter, and then they wound up being a couple of days late as well. But it wasn't like Amazon. Amazon was just, it was a shit show. And so, like, you're right, they don't make money off of that. But I think we all assume, like, we have this impression of Amazon that we get things for a reasonable cost and things shipped very quickly, and we're paying for that privilege. And this company has just really figured out how to do business around logistics well. And in my opinion, now I'm just continuing to diversify and spending my money elsewhere if I can, because I know, when things aren't going well or perfect, there's a chance that things won't get to me. The other thing that I find ironic is the last couple of days, I've gotten emails that says because the dates for delivery had been extended out post the Austin ice apocalypse or whatever. So they did get conservative on delivery dates 2 or 3 days into the crisis, pushing things a week out, a week and a half out. All of a sudden I'm getting these emails on things I ordered a few days ago, and it was like, congratulations, your order is shipping earlier than expected and will arrive earlier than expected. Your order previously due on February 5th or March 5th, whatever, March 5th is now going to arrive on March 5th. I'm like, what are you guys smoking? Like, this is, yeah. So
we're up against the clock here, Ed. So I am curious before we wrap up. Normally, Sarah does her big app of the week. I'm wondering if you have a big tool of the week that maybe you ordered from Amazon or elsewhere.
Oh, you
didn't work on it, did you?
I didn't work on it, but I got to tell you, I forgot to actually I got the song right, but you had two jobs, and I only did one of them. I don't know if this is going to become a thing, and I don't know if anybody, on stage is doing this too. It's rather geeky, but when I was a teenager, I wanted to learn ham radio. And with the Austin ice apocalypse, I'm like, we had cell towers were down for 4 days. We had no ability to communicate. So I don't know today, and it probably just arrived because I saw some motion, whatever indicator, but I did order a radio, and I'm getting ready at some point in time in the very next week or so to get my amateur radio operator's license.
Do you have to have that license to use it?
Yeah, you do. So and not to necessarily own one, but to basically use them, you do. It's 35 questions. You do need to know a bit about radio. So the thing with amateur radio is it's kind of like it's unlicensed bands. Anybody, if they have a license and they know what they're doing, can get on. You don't need to go buy, a Ma Bell Western Electric telephone to get on ham radio. Like, people can construct these things, so they want you to know the rules. So you do have to take a 35-question test to get the very first technician class license, and then there's 2 other levels beyond that. But the technician class would get you the ability to buy a radio, and you can buy old radios, you can buy new ones, and they range between $50 for really cheap ones on Amazon, Chinese clones, to a couple $100, but that would at least give you communications in your local area. And then you can use repeaters and so on. So that may be my next big, it's coming, but I can't say it's a big tool until I've really taken advantage of it. It's a super geeky hobby, but that's what I'm doing.
So, Ed, there's one advantage you have of waiting from, teenagedom to present is the Morse code is no longer a requirement for it.
Right.
Because I looked into it, decades ago, and I was like, oh man, I don't want to learn Morse.
Absolutely.
That cat from the commercials.
Yep, that was actually yeah, exactly. So that is one big difference is that I think it was a few years ago they took Morse code away as a requirement. But Greg, you could literally get one of these things, study, learn the etiquette a little bit and the rules on what you can do, and you could go order a $70 Baofeng radio from Amazon. There's been a pretty big influx of cheap Chinese radios, and some of them obviously they're junk and garbage, but some of them work okay. That you could kind of use it if you wanted to continue your journey into prepper mode.
Is it like Clubhouse but with rules?
It is like Clubhouse with rules and a lot less people doing it because there's a little bit of a bar to entry. And then it's not just an invite. You have to kind of know a little bit about radio, electronics, but really you can buy a $7 ebook that has pretty much all the answers. These are just 35 multiple choice questions. and then you can be a part of your local radio clubhouse thing. The people that are on there obviously going to be very different from your 10Xers that are on Clubhouse, but there are people nonetheless.
Which, by the way, they talked about that on the town hall today, right? They actually acknowledged there might be an issue with these millionaire clubs on Clubhouse, and that they're monitoring to make sure that nobody's getting scammed. I'm very suspicious that they're going to move quickly and swiftly on these people that are bringing thousands of people into Clubhouse.
To the platform.
Yeah, that they're going to shut this down. I'm not optimistic, but it's the worst part about this experience on Clubhouse. It's absolutely awful. And I've been you were laughing at me earlier this week. We were exchanging text messages. I was jumping into some of these forums that were like complaining about the JT Foxes and
sure.
ML billionaire or whatever his name is. I don't. They're all.
But what's the complaint? Like, is it just that these people? Because look, man, if you want to create a room to talk about like, polishing pennies, that's your right to do so on Clubhouse. Like, what's the grievance? You can hit that button that says "Leave quietly" anytime you want.
Right. The problem is these rooms are set up, and the way I've seen reviews of how some of these people speak, it's very deliberative. It's not just like one person that's coming on stage and say, hey, here are my tips and tricks, and spend $500 for my weekly newsletter and you'll get these tips on a regular basis, which is essentially like the first step of a lot of these things, right? They'll seed you with a little bit of information, sign up for my newsletter. It'll cost you $500 and you'll be on your path to wealth and success. They game the system a bit. They make sure that they share the stage with people that are fanboys, fangirls. They game everything from the interactions to what it looks like. And some of these people, I sat in some of these, they're just plain dumb. Literally, they're giving advice that in some situations could be considered illegal, and don't really work.
Interesting.
So you're right. I don't know how they crack down on that, but they are gaming the systems hard. And I'd love to see some of these people go down, because the advice, I'm hearing the advice, and I don't pretend to be a financial expert. Hell, we've been talking about how many thousands between you and I we've lost in our day trading games we've been playing.
Right.
But we're not doing it. We're not charging people for the next level of this information, which is what they're doing. And that's where it gets a little slippery.
Do you think, I don't want to drag this out, and I know we can talk about this on other weeks, but do you think the FTC is going to get involved in something like this?
They could, but I mean, how slow is the FTC? I think Clubhouse has to, and this is going to be very challenging for them. I think this is kind of that moderation thing, and it's not as black and white as some of the political discourse that was happening on Twitter that needed to be moderated, and the rumors and the fake news that was being spread around. This is a little deeper and a little seedier. And
got it.
I don't know what the right answer is, because I don't want to, harm anybody's freedom of speech to do whatever they want. But the way they game the rooms, so they took, basically what I've seen is they've taken their Facebook clubs, sent out the invites, saturated the invites within those groups. So all those people that were talking in this little corner of Facebook are now coming to Clubhouse, and their rooms are bubbling up because of the size of them. So they by virtue of how they've gamed the rooms, they get attention on everybody's hallways here, and people, unsuspectingly, without knowing anything or knowing any better, can fall into a trap.
Got it.
And I just don't know how you fix that. But what they're suggesting is that if you don't follow any of those people, that room shouldn't end up in your hallway. And so I think they're probably going to, they didn't say this, I'm going to guess that one of the ways they fix that is to not rely on the size of the room to be the determining factor if that's interesting for your hallway feed. I think
and
that's what they're going to do.
Not spam the shit out of my phone, like with all of these irrelevant things, like, notifications. This thing is like on meth 24/7.
Oh, it is. I turned off notifications for it. I'll see the notifications when my red dot pops up by my name or by my icon at the top of the screen. I don't, everybody should turn off their notifications for Clubhouse.
But see, that's the thing, right? Part of the draw is that, if your friends go into a room, like, you think you should maybe go too, because it might be something that's interesting. So yeah, they definitely have to figure out the filtering of kind of gamed up rooms. And it's equivalent of like very, insidious like spam, right? Like it's just it's seeping in there. So anyway,
so we got to wrap up this week. And Eddie, unfortunately, you've got another task here because Sarah and Amy aren't here. I'm going to run through the laundry list that we always do, wrap up our shows with. How can people stalk us on the Twitters?
I got a bone to pick with Amy and Sarah if this shit gets dumped on me because they all peace out on the thing. But on Twitter at nerd_herd_pod.
And how can we extend the conversation in Slack with anyone that's interested?
Yeah, bit.ly/nerdherdpod. And then also, while you're at it, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes.
You nailed it.
And then the most important thing is come join us on a Sunday if you don't have a ton going on for the conversation. Because to me, that's the most fun engagement is having people that listen to us have a chat with us and join the conversation on Clubhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been a lot of fun since we've been on Clubhouse. I think this is a great way to engage. We've had a few folks from the audience join us today. It was really great. So thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Vung. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Liz. And hopefully, and if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can, if you don't have an invite, feel free to hit myself up or Eddie. And I'm sure Sarah and Amy also have invites to give away as well. Hit us up. We'll send you an invite and would love to have you aboard. We do this every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So please feel free to join us. And on that note, we'll wrap up this week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Eddie. We'll see everybody next week.
See ya.